What, a car accident? Stimley, right there. Russian Springs? Oh, I, I was okay. Before you get to the, so that's I know where Eureka is. I thought this was that Stim. This is what Stimley was it? Stimley Road or? Mm-hmm. That's where I go to turn. Yep, that's where my dad has always said that there would be someone killed there because you can't see them going over the hill. Yes, that does happen too. Bad, yes, yes. Yes, usually, yeah, and and so when they run that stop sign, and they're usually flying because speed limit's supposed to be 40, but it's a racetrack, too close to the raceway, so they practice it. The Ellis family, yes. Wasn't it his mama passed away or her mother? Yeah, and bless the Ellis family. So let's remember the Ellis family in South Carolina. Who else do we need to remember? Be Billy. Yeah, that's always an issue. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask Him to remember these that we've mentioned today, and ask Him to bless us as we study together. Heavenly Father, we're so glad that you're here with us and that you're able to help us and guide us, that you walk with us, and that you are able to make a difference in our lives and other people's lives. Lord, there's some people going through some valleys, and they need your help and your blessings. So we ask that upon them now. We ask for your blessings as we study your word, as we see it as your word and not anything else, for it's attacked in many different ways. And as we study that and as we talk about that tonight, we just praise you and honor you for protecting your Bible and protecting us, that we may know how we are to walk and the lessons that we need to learn. We thank you for all you do in our lives, and we ask for your blessings. In Jesus' name, amen. We're in chapter 5, and we're going to be talking about confronting sin. Ooh, that's not a good topic to talk about, is it? So, I want you to go back to your time when you were a child. When were you a child? How did you know you were in trouble? Hmm. Basically, so yep. When Jenny was breathing, she was always in trouble. So I'm repeating it so the people that's watching us online can. Don't say the last name. Then don't give last names, okay? But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give my last name. I knew I was in trouble when Mama said, Mark Allen Shaw. You knew it. Did your parents ever use that? And you got the full name, your God-given name that you knew you were in trouble. The author here states that, hey, how many times does it take us to not walk in the house with muddy shoes? Does it take us once, twice, 3 times, 10 times? How many times did it take us to learn? Mine was Keep that door closed. Get out or stay in. Get out or stay in. How many times before that door shut and said, you're in? Most of the times it was shut saying, you're out. And that's when the time we said, yay! But if you wanted something to drink, you better know how to use a hose pipe and turn the water spigot on and drink from that water. Yes, I grew up in those days, folks. Those were not very long ago. Those were just 4 decades ago, say, 40 years. And look what we've changed. We don't even let our dogs drink out of the hose pipe anymore, do we? We have to go get that filtered water from our house and put it out there for those doggies. We want to make sure our doggies are taken care of. Do you still tell your kids to go drink from the hose pipe, though? Well, that's the question I have to ask you. Doggies may not drink from the hose pipe, but those kids, you may get mad enough to say, you just go fend for yourself. Well, tonight we're going to learn about a guy who that saw and was confronted with his sins, and he knew better. And his name is Belshazzar, King Belshazzar. We're also going to be looking at a passage of the Bible that many non-scholars or non-biblical scholars look at and say, this is a bunch of hogwash. You don't even have your history right. This book was not written. If you look at the timeline I passed out a long time ago, and I've recopied it on your notes I've passed out today, you see that this book was probably put together around 530 BC. About 500 years when it was finally put together by Daniel. Some scholars say it was not even put together then. It was put in an earlier date. They put it maybe between 150 to 200 BC, and that's why everything's out of whack, why the history is wrong, and everything. And this is one of the chapters they point to, chapter 5 in the book of Daniel, and say, y'all got it wrong. And this is the way I look at it. If we got it, this part wrong, what means Genesis isn't right? What means that Jesus isn't right? If you discredit any of the Bible, why listen to the other part? So I'm going to look at Daniel chapter 5, and we're going to try to put it together historically and say, hey, this does fit. And we'll look at some of those. And right now, my disclaimer. I will mispronounce some of these names. That is my disclaimer. Because I want to challenge you, unless you're a historian, to come up here and help me with all these Babylonian kings. Besides the Babylonian kings, we got to study the Persian kings. So that's 2 sets of kings we have to study and have to know. And then we have to know Aramaic. How many of us know Aramaic in here? I don't. I butcher the king's English, okay? Or I even butcher Southern English. Okay. So that lets you know where I'm at. But let's look at the book of Daniel, and we'll start talking about it together. And, of course, it's going to be 30 verses, and we're going to read them all, and I'm going to pronounce all these names. Some of them I'm going to get right, because I have studied some of them, and some of them I'm going to talk about are not even in the Bible. But that because people question the history, you got to look at it. So we'll look at some non-biblical names of these kings and see where they fit. Okay. King Belshazzar. I started out wrong, didn't I? Belshazzar. Okay, King Belshazzar made a great feast for thousands of his lords and drank wine in the presence of thousands. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and the silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, that the king of his lords, his wives, and his concubines may drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of the God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the kings and his lords and his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron and wood and stone. In the same hour, the fingers of a man appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand of the plaster on the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened, and his knees knocked against each other. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. The king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me the interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king its interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled, with his countenance was changed, and his lords were astonished. The queen because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall. The king spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. There is a man in the kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him the chief of the magistrate, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, inasmuch as excellent spiritual knowledge, understanding, interpretation of dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Isn't that funny? That's the same name, isn't it? Now let David be called and give the interpretation. Ooh, that lady knew something, what she said. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you the Daniel who is the one of the captives of Judea, whom my father the king brought from Judea? I have heard of you that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in you. Now the wise men and the astrologers have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me the interpretation. But they could not give an interpretation of the things. And I've heard of you that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Okay, so here's the background. We're seeing that sin is just running rampant here. We got Belshazzar. Now, who is Belshazzar? First time he's mentioned, isn't it? Yep. They say he was a son of Nebuchadnezzar, but technically he was not. Ooh, so there's a question. There is an issue. But Nebuchadnezzar was his grandfather. So there we go. So let's look. If you look at the outline of the kings of the Neo-Babylon Empire, this is what they call that era. You got Nebuchadnezzar, who was the first king, and he reigned to 605 BC. And he died. Then his son became king, who received all the glory. because he was the one that was basically conquering all these countries and areas, including Jerusalem. So Nebuchadnezzar became the second king in this line. Then, you see, he had a bunch of relatives who fought over the kingdom. His son was evil Nobach, like Murdoch. And he ruled 4 years. Guess what happened to him? There was a coup, and he was kicked out, and Nebuchadnezzar became king. And he was a pretty good king. He knew what he was doing. But who was he? Well, he was a son-in-law who took charge. So that means if he was a son-in-law, he married one of Nebuchadnezzar's daughters. And he had a son, and his name was Labash Murdoch, basically named after the god of there. And he ruled less than a year. And guess what happened to him? Kicked out, deposed. Then you have the next king and the last king. Ooh, you're going to say the last king. Yes, the last king. That's where you get into the issues. Who is King Belshazzar? We don't know. For about all the way to probably the 19th century, about the middle of the 1840s something, there was no historical record of Belshazzar. There was only records of Nebuchadnezzar. I did practice that name. Nabonidus. That was his name. Nabonidus. Because there's a lot of stuff written about Nabonidus, because he was the last king of the Babylon. But why does he reign from 1556 to 539 BC? Well, he did not really like Babylon. And he had a different god than Marduk. He had the god of sin. So he kind of got out of that area. He left that area. He was still the king. But he had a son, the oldest son, which was Belshazzar. And Belshazzar was in Babylon. So, but how do we know that? Because there's no record or anything of him until 1840. Because that's where people would attack the Bible, say, there's no thing. There is no king called Belshazzar. No way. Then, some archaeologists digging around in Iran found something. And what did they find? They found some what they call the cylinders of Nabonidus cylinders. One was found in Sippar, and the other one of them which talked about building the temple. You've got pictures, they're cylinders, and this is what they look like, just to show people that maybe the close-up, but they're little cylinders with graphics written on there. Cuneiform language. Then they found 4 of them, cylinders in Ur, which talked about that temple, and the 4 they found in Ur were in each of the corners. And that's what archaeologists found in 1840s and 1870s. Well, they included a saying in there. And they included cylinders, and there was 4 of the others. And this is what they found. A saying, a writing. As for me, this is Nabonidus' saying. And this is what he recorded. As for me, Nabonidus, king of Babylon, save me from sinning against the great Godhead and grant me a presence of life long days. And As for my Belshazzar, eldest son, my offering, install reverence for a great Godhead in his heart, and may he not commit any cultic mistakes. May he be sated with a life of plenitude. Bingo. There is his name. Nebuchadnezzar basically was not in that area. And what did he do? He set his son up to be king and rule that area. And guess where Belshazzar was at that point in time? He was having a feast in Babylon that night, 539 BC. I probably could give you the date if I'd pay attention when I was reading, but there's an exact date when the city of Babylon fell to the Persian king and all. And so you seeing that picture right there and what that picture is. If you turn over to the next page, you see there is more evidence that talks about Nebuchadnezzar's Chronicles, which was basically written by the Cyrus the Great, the Persian, talking about Nebuchadnezzar and his fall. But you see, people were criticizing the Bible, saying it wasn't this, and Belshazzar didn't even exist. But when you started digging around, looking through historical archaeology, you find him. So what Daniel is writing about King Belshazzar, technically he was the king of that area. Not officially, but he was the son. He was the one next in power. So what happens when the king's away? I usually say the mice will play. Well, Belshazzar was playing. He was having a feast, but should he have been having a feast at that time? Why is he having a big feast when outside the walls, at that very moment, the Persians and the Mede and Cyrus's generals were at the doorstep? I mean, they were there. He was surrounded, and he was having a feast. But he believed so secure of the Babylonian era and what it was like. Do you remember what the walls were like and how thick those walls were and how it was hard to do and some of the things that it had to do? It fell in the late Octobers when it fell in 539 BC. And Babylon thought they were so secure. Those walls were so high that 4 chariots could run across them at a time. And so they were saying, there's no way a king... And then they had the Euphrates River running right through it. And the king says, oh, they may be outside, but I still got... It said that they had enough food supply to last them 2 years and without starvation. They were going to wait them out. And that's what they were saying. We're going to have a party. We're going to do what we want to. But what they did is they had a party. And they got so intoxicated, they decided, okay, we know our gods. But this Jewish God, Nebuchadnezzar, conquered them. My grandfather, my father conquered them. They're no good. And they got all this nice stuff. Bring it in. I want a party. I want to use those tableware that was used in the temple. I want to use those gold cups, those silver cups, everything. I want to use them. I want to show my guests and my family and all that, hey, I control this and my God. And so they praised their God. We know that right there in that city, Marduk was the lead god who they believed in and worshiped. There was his temple there. There was basically another Zygarde that was built 7 stories high that had his symbol on it, and they worshiped him and they praised him. And boom, we're going to worship our gods. Then what happened? God showed up. God showed up by sending and writing on the wall. Now, I don't know when I looked up the words and the definition, or my wife looked up the words and the definitions, I said, what language is that? She said it was Aramaic. I'm sitting there saying, how did they not know it was Aramaic? It was basically one of the languages of all Middle East, but those scribes, neither did the king know it. So I don't know why they couldn't read it, or did not have the language and skills, or were they just so drunk, or did God hide it from them? We don't know that. But we know God wrote it up there. And of course, here Belshazzar's like, I got an issue. Something's writing and scaring the hell out of me, messing my party up. I need to know. He got so scared because it was, imagine just a hand writing on the wall. That was it. Usually when you have kids and they write on the wall, you know there's a whole body there. You know they got their crayons in their room, or they left them laying on the floor. And who knows, they may have come in from the mud and brought that mud into the house too from their shoe prints. And they did all that. But here, they didn't know what it was, couldn't read it, and the hand mysteriously disappeared after it wrote, and the message was given. See, there is going to be times that, hey, we need to be confronted with sin. And one day that we will all have to face our sins. So, as you think about this, and you think about what God did here, and how he didn't reveal it, because he brought in all the foreign, think about all the non-biblical or non-Christian religions out there that are out there today. That's what basically Belshazzar did. I'm going to bring my people in. They're going to tell me what this is. They're going to be able to read it and tell me what it says. So I'm going to bring all my astrologers, all my soothsayers. I'm going to bring all those people in. And they're going to tell me. And guess what? When God lays something down, he's going to bring the message and the answer through his people. And that's what he did. He says, I'm going to show you all your foreign religions and all your gods and all, and how dare you desecrate something I made holy. There is going to be accountability. And there was no way they would know that, hey, this is sin. Then the queen came in. Now, who was this queen? We don't know. Doesn't say. It was probably his mama. Hearing all the ruckus and everything going on. Walked in there. Of course, they got quiet when mom shows up after you've done something wrong. What do, kids? You hush up. Maybe mom won't know I wrote on the wall tonight. She's going to know. Mom's going to know. Even if you don't think she's going to know, we're going to know, folks. There's no way to hide your sin. If mama don't find out, we got a God who's going to find out. When people say to me, well, you may not be able to do nothing about it and all that, and people are not going to know I did that, that's fine. That's not who, but I'm not going to worry about it. You talk it over with God and you work it out with him, and that's all you have to work it out with. Then people go, why you do that to me? Why you bring God in this? Well, he's always in it and always in our relationships. Even though the world may not know about it, God does, and that's what God knew here. And the queen mother came in and says, son. Or they were husband says, husband, let me tell you something. You know your father or your grandfather, and he probably knew his grandfather. If you look at the time sheet of all this and what was going on in it and his kingdom and all, he probably knew his grandfather. Because basically, Nebuchadnezzar passed away around 562 BC, and he reigned from like 553 BC, Belshazzar. So he probably knew a little bit about his grandfather. And all of a sudden, Mom comes in and says, hey, remember your grandfather and all he taught you and everything that happened to him, and that he had one guy that could answer anything he wanted. And he always depended on that one guy. Now, you've thrown this one guy out. He's not around again. How funny is it? Daniel was always the last one to be asked. Even though he got it right the first time, the second time, and the third time, he's going to get it right. And all these dreams and interpretations and all, and there's going to be more times, because he had 2 more dreams and interpretations during Belshazzar's. We'll read about them in chapters 7 and 8, some of those dreams that he had and visions he had about the future times. We'll read them. So in the first year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he had a dream. Third year, he had a dream. And he wrote them out. And so we're having Daniel do all these things, and he never gets recognized, and the people keep falling in the same sin. I mean, it took Nebuchadnezzar a long time to figure that out, didn't he? He had what? He had 3 dreams. Or he had a dream, then he had a building a idol, almost had Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego killed. Then he had another dream, and Daniel says, look, you're going to have some bad things happen to you if you don't get your attitude right. He tried to straighten up, but not all the way. And in the last chapter, we found out God took care of him, didn't he? Made him what some psychologist says is a type of form of a psychology where you think you're an animal and you're a cow and you go out and eat on it. And so that what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. And so his mother, now think about it, if it's his mother, that means that she's the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. So she knew a lot about it. And she was telling her son, look, you should have known. You've heard the stories, you've seen everything. You know about Daniel. Go get him. Let's get this over with. Moms, have you ever done that? You just said, let's go take care of it and get it over. That's the way I'm pretty much. Okay, we got an issue. Let's go take care of it. I'm the one. Let's go take care of it. I'm not going to wait around. I'm not going to sit around. I'm not going to go to sleep tonight worrying about it, so I might as well go take care of it. That's the way I work. And so here he was saying, hey, go get this guy. So Belshazzar says, I'm going to go get him. And it's how funny how he says, anybody that tells me these interpretations, I'm going to make them, I'm going to give them a purple robe, I'm going to give them a necklace, and I'm going to make them third. It says third. Catch that? Third in the highest form of the kingdom. See, Belshazzar knew that he wasn't the first, did he? He knew he had a father, Nebuchadnezzar, and he was the real king. So he couldn't make him third in the line. He had to make, second in the line, he had to make him the third. So you see the history being proof right there in just the writing. Okay? So all that is happening and everything. And then we get to the next part. Daniel is now on the scene. And it reads in verse 17 to verse 21. It reads, Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts gifts be for yourself, and give your reward to another. Yet I will read the writings to the king and make known to him the interpretation. Now he's going to confront the king. Because I imagine, if it wasn't been for God's Spirit in Daniel, I'd have went in there the last time. I said, dudes, get it right. I've been right all the time, and you you waste my time. You don't bring me in to do it. I'm sitting around twiddling my thumbs, wondering why y'all screaming and yelling, watching these Chaldeans out there, these Persians out there fixing to run all over us, and you're partying with the temple stuff. Woo! Y'all got so messed up. And so as he's reading, he says, O King Most High, O King, the Most High God, gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty, glory and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and language trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him like grass, like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and appointed over it to whom he ever chooses. Wow. What a lesson. He's saying, Belshazzar, why? You knew. You knew how God worked. You knew that he used Nebuchadnezzar to basically bring about judgment on a lot of people who refused him, who refused to follow God. And God used Nebuchadnezzar and gave him everything. He conquered the Syrian Empire. He conquered all the way to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and Jerusalem and down toward Egypt. He conquered it all. And God gave him every language and everything and Nebuchadnezzar thought it was him that did it all. But God brought him low. And you know this story, Belshazzar. You've seen this story. You've heard about this story. That what happened to your grandfather, how God brought him down, put him out in a field, took everything from him. But as soon as Nebuchadnezzar realized that the gods you're worshiping right now, the gods you're giving attention to, are not the real gods, and he praised the true and holy God. We only have to go back a chapter in the book of Daniel because Daniel records it. We talked about it last week. And Daniel's repeating it to Belshazzar, whose time has passed, has forgotten it all, and still worshipped all these other gods. It's funny how Nebuchadnezzar, he built all this kingdom, he built all these gods, and how all of a sudden his life was changed. But he wasn't able to pass on the new knowledge. See, same thing I talked about, how Paul wasn't able to go and preach and be an apostle in Jerusalem because of what? All the things he did. His past. Your past is your past. Sometimes you have to live with your past. But God can change that. God changed Nebuchadnezzar, but his past influenced his sons, his daughters, his sons-in-law, now his grandson. His Nebuchadnezzar's past, and they were still worshiping those other gods and didn't realize how God had really changed their life. Another instance is Manasseh in the Chronicle, first in Kings and in Chronicles, of how he was such the worst king that Israel that the nation of Judah ever had, and how his life was changed. And how God used the Assyrian army to take him into captivity, and he went up there and praised God, but he came back down to be the king of Judah again, and started changing things, but it was too late for the ones he had already influenced. And that their lives never changed. And because of the sins of Manasseh, they say, because it kept being passed on. Same thing with Adam and Eve. The sins of Cain kept going on until they got to what? Noah's Ark. And God says, it's so bad. We think it's bad now. Imagine how bad it was for God to send a flood to flood the whole world back then. How bad the situation, and how he changed the landscape. Because what we see today is not the way it was back then. God changed the whole world. He changed the climate. He changed everything. He changed the way the world was, the land masses were together. We have all these Mount Everest and all these mountain ranges. Why? Because the flood came and it pushed all these continents together. Crushed them. Why the dinosaurs disappeared? Is the whole world was flooded. They said, a lot of people say, hey, an asteroid killed it. Killed them all. Wiped them all out. Well, it was a major catastrophe. Yeah, there was a major catastrophe. It wasn't an asteroid. It was a flood. Noah's Ark took care of all that. So we see how sin can be rampant and how Daniel confronted. He says, look at the past. Look at the opportunities you had, Belshazzar, to get it right. But you didn't. You messed up. You didn't look at how your grandfather and all that happened to him. So you must think, why do people often fail to make connection between sin and its consequence? Ooh. He's being confronted with his sin and the consequences he was fixing to have. Imagine how upset God was when he says, okay, I've shown you. I've lived through Nebuchadnezzar. I've shown you how you should live. And now you're desecrating my place, my holy instruments, with your pagan worship of worshiping other things. Yep. Didn't connect it. Wasn't there. Then in verse 26 through 23, we read a little bit more. Or 22 through 23, it says, But you, his son Belshazzar, has not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. There it is. He knew it all. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven, that have brought the vessels of the house before you. And you and your lords, your wives, your concubines, have drunk wine from them. And you having praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know that the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Wow. Pretty tough, isn't it? He's being confronted right there. Look at your actions. You know, I've just told you about Nebuchadnezzar and how you should have known. Hey, folks, we should know. No excuse. God's given us his word. God's given us his spirit. We should know. And there it is. You should have known. You should have seen that my God, the true God, is it. But you still desecrate him and not recognize. You worship all these gods of things. Think about it. He says you worship the God of silver, gold, bronze, and iron, wood. Then it keeps going down. Wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. Wow. Think about it. Think about society today. Think about where it's going. Then in verse 24 through 28, it reads, Then the finger of the hands were sent from him, and this is what it was written. And this is the inscription that has written. Mene, 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 tekel, you Persian. That was it. And that was Aramaic. This is the interpretation. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom, and it's finished. Imagine what Belshazzar thought, because he knew what was out of those walls. Saying, those out there, those Persians, they're coming. And many, he just didn't do it once, did he? He stomped it and says twice. Mene. Tekel, you have been weighed in balance and found wanting. Imagine. It's going to fall. Your sins have got you. And I've looked at you, and there's no hope for you. Think about the way your tekel would be. If he was going to measure you and balance you, would you be found wanting? Or have you trusted Jesus and given him his place? Because Jesus says, I've paid the price. I have done it all. For whoever calls upon his name shall be saved. He's weighed that balance for you. It is there. Will you be found on that balance? And Persian means your kingdom has been divided and been given to those who are outside your wall. They're coming. There is no stopping them. It is going to happen. Wow. And so we see that written on that wall, and it explains that his kingdom is divided and all. So what did he do about it? What could he do about it? He had to keep his word, didn't he? Verse 29, Then Belshazzar gave the command that they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. What did Daniel say earlier? He didn't want it. Why? Because he knew it wasn't going to hold up. He was a king for a day, wasn't he? Maybe not even a day. Because what it says, this had to be October 1539. That very night, Belshazzar, king of Chaldean, was slain. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Okay. Wow. Boom. What is going on? Belshazzar. Because basically history says the Persians just walked on in. Took over. They snuck in. It's like the Trojan horse. Basically like that. You could say it could be like some of the battles of Jericho where the walls fell and the people just rushed in. But Babylon never fell. They snuck in and they got in. And they made those changes. And here is an issue that we confront again, starting right here in verse 31. That people say, this does not exist. Darius the Mede received the kingdom being about 62 years of age. There is no historical record of Darius. And guess what? There's no historical, so that means they haven't found anything that describes who he was or what he is. There's some way. Now you might say, well, that just proves the Bible. Well, it just proved that Belshazzar existed. He was Nebuchadnezzar's son. He was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. What more you want? You're saying Daniel, but every time you find something archaeology-wise, what does it usually do? It proves that the Bible is accurate in its historical documentation. Because God never lies. So, if you look on the little thing, it says the Persian kings during the exile and post-exile period. Because Persia came in, they took over. Persia was more toward, you got Babylon here. Persia was more to the east and out there, a little further away. More of Afghanistan area and that area, and Iran and Iraq. And you see the first king that walked in was Cyrus, and he reigned from 559 to 530 BC. And you see that Ezra, Daniel, and all them talk about him. And you may say, well, Daniel didn't mention him in 5. Well, we got to find out who Cyrus is and who Darius is. Because you got Cambius, Samaritas, then you got Darius the first, 521 to 486. See, a lot of people used to think that this Darius there was this one here, and they tried to put it together, but historically you can't put that together. Because Darius he wasn't even alive at that point in time, probably. In 539. He could have been alive. He probably was, but he's probably a little boy. So Darius the first didn't even have anything to do with this Darius here. So we got to find out who this Darius is. Because that's where people say, hey, Darius is later. This is not accurate. How could it be Darius? This had to be a later writing around 200 to 150 BC, and a bunch of people just put things together and didn't know historically what they were even talking about. Daniel didn't write none of this, but we know Daniel wrote it. So we have to find out who this Darius is. Who is this Darius? Well, let's look and see. The Darius problem. Who could it be? There's basically 4 ways that we can look at this. Darius may be a title, some say. He could have been a title for the Persian kings. Darius like Caesar. You got Caesar Augustus. Then you got Nero. He was considered Caesar. And you have all those people. And so that's what's going on. And then after that, it could have been that, just like the title Pharaoh. Then you have another possibility, is that Darius was Gabaralis, which is mentioned in the Chronicles, was basically the general who marched in and took over Babylon. Some say and then you get into studying history, they say it could have been also Guberal or Uberal. Those names could have been the same guy, so they could have been or they may have not been. We don't know. The third. A fourth view is Darius the Mede was the son of Cyrus. That could have been possibly, who ruled from 530 to 522. But that means he had to receive that title. We quite don't know. A lot of people think that Darius is just another name like Caesar or like Pharaoh. Some think he was this general, because if you look, it says he was 62 years old. That general was pretty old. Cyrus was not that old. So there is debate about that. But does that make this inaccurate? No, because I look at it and say, well, you also said that Belshazzar didn't exist neither, and guess what? My goodness, you found some writing. Maybe you need to look at the Bible and follow it more than try to make it your own interpretation, because the Bible's right. And one day we may find that document, and they got to go back and they got to eat their words again, saying, oh, this Darius, we know who he is now. Oh, goodness gracious. Because we know who Belshazzar is. But Darius will be a very big figure in the next chapter, chapter 6, because it's the story that we all know about, the kids know about, and a bunch of lives are in it. So next week we'll cover that. We're going to close in prayer, because guess what? I've even let the youth beat me tonight. They're done.